Hello writers, come write with me. My name is Mykela Greenwood. I create worlds for mind adventures. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Write with Mykela. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can go on this journey with me. Today is Friday and a day of our chapter exchange. If you are writing with me and you wish to exchange chapters, then I need written permission to read your chapter on the channel, along with your name or pen name and age. I also need permission from your parent or legal guardian if you are under 18 years of age. If you're under 18 years old and have guardian permission, then I will need a pen name to read your material. Writers may send their chapters in PDF or Word document format to WritewithMykela@gmail.com. That's WritewithMykela@gmail.com. I'm not making any promises to read every chapter sent to me on the channel, but I intend to read them all myself. I intend to read all of your chapters. When I do read some chapters from others, you will realize the fun. You will get to see that even though we're using the same plot, our stories are very different. I encourage you to have fun with me and join the chapter exchange. If you don't have the plot, then send an email and ask for plot 1. And the email will be listed down at the end of the video as well. When I read others' chapter, I will release a second video on Friday. All chapters read on Fridays, whether they are mine or another writer's work, are copyright protected material, and no one may use any part in their own writing or in writing their own stories. Now, before we go any farther, I will remind everyone that this story is at least PG-13, and this story is in its rough draft stage and needs many more passes of edits, but we will read it together. Now let's read City of the Ancients, Chapter 8, The Adventure Begins. Kyrsha and Kyltie walked down a couple of passageways and then lay down on the cave floor to sleep. Near midnight, Kyrsha exited the cave and headed south. After he crossed the Essen River, he would head southeast. The sun had started rising when Kyrsha came to the river. He crossed the river, turned southeast, and kept going. He would rest soon. He would rest at noon during the hottest part of the day. Kyrsha woke early. She turned up the oil lamp and read City of the Ancients. She felt that if Kyltie was resting, then Kyltie needed the rest. When Kyltie awoke, Kyrsha got out some hard biscuits for them. They ate and walked. It was mid-morning when Kyrsha and Kyltie made it to the first chamber. Kyrsha took some things out of the bag and carried them up. She did this several more times until everything was out of the cave. Kyrsha had to lift Kyltie up several of the steps. When they exited, Kyrsha put everything back in the bag. Kyltie said she could walk, so they spread the parchment over the little cart. They wanted to make sure it was dry before they rolled it up. Kyrsha and Kyltie also headed south, but Kyrsha wasn't going straight home. She planned on following the Essen River to Castle North Polk. Kyrsha traveled towards home, resting only during the middle of the day. Kyrsha and Kyltie traveled to Castle North Polk, resting at night. During the middle of the day, as Kyrsha and Kyltie walked along the river's edge, they came upon an overturned boat. Kyrsha checked the boat for seaworthiness. They were in luck. There was even the bottom of a paddle. Kyrsha promptly tied a thick stick to the top of the paddle. She loaded the little cart in the middle of the boat. She put the bag back in the cart. She stationed Kyltie up front with strict instructions not to wiggle at all. Kyrsha pushed the boat into the river. The strong current was stronger than she expected, and the river deeper than she thought it to be. She struggled, but finally she was able to pull the boat back to shore. This time, she got in and used the makeshift paddle to push the boat out into the river. The river was swift. Kyrsha hoped that she wouldn't have to do too much maneuvering. She wasn't experienced, and the paddle didn't feel like it would hold together. Kyrsha thought, that sure was a strange place to find a boat. It's almost like someone put it there for us. But no one knew that I was going this way. I didn't even know until I read more in that book. Kyltie still may not know for sure. Since the river was so swift, Kyrsha didn't bother trying to pull the boat ashore. The moon was half full, the stars were bright, and the night sky was clear. Kyrsha felt sure that she could see something coming soon enough. Commander Rivas, called Kyrsha. I want you to see this. Commander Rivas stopped and turned back. He had finished his rounds and he was heading home. He looked at his queen's face. She was happier than she had been in days. King Arik was following behind her. His face was also beaming. Queen Kyrsha held out her green glowing orb for Commander Rivas to look into. He saw an extra wide and extra long dinghy which held Kyrsha, Kyltie, and their small cart. He looked up at his queen. I've never seen a dinghy like that before. Kyrsha made it with her magic, replied Queen Kyrsha. Really? That's amazing. I thought she didn't know any spells yet. How can she... Can you make a boat with your magic? Asked Queen Kyrsha. I might could if I had the materials available, replied Commander Rivas. Kyrsha can go beyond the laws of magic, and she doesn't even know spells. She doesn't know any spells yet, stated Queen Kyrsha. Kyrsha also denies the magic, dear, put in King Arik. Don't get your hopes too high. But I would love for the Ultrarium to be back in the mortal realm. I want my people free to come and go. I know, dear, replied King Arik. But all the same, let us be patient. Even if Kyrsha comes to her potential, she cannot bring back the Ultrarium by herself. But there is hope, put in Commander Rivas. A hope I shouldn't see. I'm sure now, my lady, that Farsnal is trying to come back. I feel him using my magic to gain substance for himself. If you kill me, he can't use my magic. He can't come back. My lady, I did not kill him or his bodily substance here in the Ultrarium, but I am here now. So when he comes back, he will come back here. Commander Rivas, we have discussed this, stated Queen Kyrsha sternly. Besides, you killed him once before. You can kill him again. This time, just don't make the last blow a magical one, put in King Arik. But if he comes here, he can open a gate for more dissenters to come here, protested Commander Rivas. Then I suggest you prepare for war, stated Queen Kyrsha. I will not have you killed for your mistake. You were protecting me. You did everything you could. The dissenters are strong against us, and always have been. Perhaps making the Ultrarium was a mistake, because the dissenters have grown in number on this planet with my children, and in the entire universe. We have not. We have limited ourselves. One limit is that we separated ourselves from our children and cannot train them. If my children cannot bring us back, then we will be stuck here. Unless the dissenters indeed cause a rift in order to enter. So I do not want you for a moment thinking you have no right to be here. If Farsnal returns, then he returns. We will deal with him. And we will deal with him by using our best and most trustworthy commander. That commander is you, Rivas. I'm counting on you. I don't want my children to return only for the dissenters to kill them. Yes, my lady, I will do as asked. I will prepare the troops for battle. For while you cannot train your children, The rest of the Kai can train theirs, since their children are here." Queen Arisha nodded her head, and Commander Rivas left for his home. King Arik placed his hands on Queen Arisha's shoulders. He wasn't trying to be mean when he said the rest of the Kai children were here. "I know," replied Queen Arisha softly. "He was acknowledging our sacrifice and our anguish." In the middle of the second night, Kyrsha jerked awake. The river had slowed considerably. Kyrsha noticed that the river was wider here. Soon the river would turn south. Kyrsha dozed back to sleep. The third morning since they had separated, Kyrian saw the village. It took him another half an hour to get there. Kyrian quickened his pace. He hoped that he could slip into the house without the villagers noticing him. Kyrian slipped in quickly and quietly. At mid-morning, the baker came by. Kyrian had already cleaned up and was downstairs. "Good morning, Kyrian." "Good morning, Mr. Volkov." "It has been 2 weeks since Kyrsha has come to get any bread," said Mr. Volkov. "Is everything okay?" "Oh, yes, everything is fine," replied Kyrian. "Where's Kyrsha now?" pressed Mr. Volkov. "She's still asleep. You know, once women start something, they just won't put it down until they finish," stated Kyrian. "She stayed up late, finishing a piece of lace." "Would you like to see it?" "Of course," replied Mr. Volkov. "Will she mind you showing it off?" "No, just a minute, and I'll be back." Kyrian hurried up the stairs. He hoped Kyrsha didn't come through the door while Mr. Volkov was here. Kyrian grabbed a piece of lace. He noticed a piece of linen that she had embroidered as well. He grabbed that too. Kyrian descended the stairs quickly. Then he thought, "I need to calm down, or Mr. Volkov's suspicions will soar." He descended the last few steps slowly and quietly, as if he didn't wish to awaken someone. Kyrian showed Mr. Volkov both pieces. "I don't know when she did the embroidery," stated Kyrian, "but I don't remember her working on it. Both pieces were together." "Looks like she stayed up the entire night," stated Mr. Volkov. "Both pieces are beautiful. Now bread. Do you want some fresh bread? I have some rising as we speak." "Of course," answered Kyrian. "Can you bring a batch of cookies too? Kyltie is laid up in bed from a snake bite. I'm sure some cookies will brighten her day." "I heard about her bite, and I wish I could bring cookies. But I'm sorry, Kyrian, I'm out of syrup. She'll have to wait until I can go tap some more," replied Mr. Volkov. "Good day, Kyrian. I'll bring the bread later, and I'll pass the word that Kyrsha has finished a piece of lace." Kyrian smiled. "Good day, Mr. Volkov." Mr. Volkov left. Oh, that was close. How would I explain leaving 2 females out there, especially with one injured? I can't. At least Mr. Volkov won't need to personally deliver Kyltie any cookies. Kyrian shook off his thoughts. He busied himself with setting up shop. A little after mid-morning, Kyrsha awoke. Everything seemed fine with the little boat. From the look of things, Kyrsha knew they had turned south. She hoped the river ran close enough to the castle so that she would see it. Then Kyrsha noticed the parchment. She pulled the large page down onto her lap after she freed the page's corners. She turned it one way and then the other. She said. "It looks like the river goes through the castle." "What?" asked Kyltie. "Huh?" asked Kyrsha. "Oh, nothing. I was just talking to myself." "My dad used to say that only magic users talk to themselves," stated Kyltie. Kyrsha looked up. "Your real dad or Kyrian?" "My real dad," replied Kyltie. "But everybody talks to themselves," stated Kyrsha. "No. Some people think out loud. Some people talk to an imaginary friend or an imaginary pet. Some people talk to the awesome. Some people talk to the trees. Some people talk to dead friends or relatives. Kyrsha threw up her hands. Okay, I understand. Jeez, stated Kyrsha. Well, I'm not a magic user, but I am talking to myself, and we ask that you be quiet so that we can talk. Now, where were we? If you don't know magic, then where did the boat come from? Kyltie challenged. The boat was in the grass, returned Kyrsha, irritated. She was losing her patience. You saw it, same as me. No, it wasn't, argued Kyltie. It just appeared before my feet. You know, that poison has seeped into your mind, stated Kyrsha. No, I promise it hasn't, stated Kyltie. Test me. Ask me any question from my lessons. Spell preoccupied, challenged Kyrsha. PREOCCUPIED, spelled Kyltie. And what does it mean? Pressed Kyrsha. It means occupied with something before something else happens that needs your attention, answered Kyltie. Exactly, agreed Kyrsha. The poison has seeped into your mind, or your mind was preoccupied with something else. I know you're lying, stated Kyltie, because I've seen you do other things. Kyltie's bold statement shocked Kyrsha. She stared at Kyltie. Can you teach me? Kyltie asked. I won't tell anyone. I promise I won't. Kyltie, I did not make the boat appear. How would I do that? With magic, Kyltie answered. Kyrsha was becoming frustrated. So you think that I could make a duck appear right here beside the boat? Just poof. Kyrsha snapped her fingers. No, because I know only the awesome can make living things appear. You would have to call it or something, replied Kyltie. I'm not stupid. Okay. Then, if I made the boat appear, how come I didn't make a whole paddle appear? Kyrsha ridiculed. I don't know. Maybe you can't picture a whole paddle in your mind, reasoned Kyltie. Or maybe you only remembered half the spell. Kyrsha sighed. It was no use to argue. Kyltie was convinced. Kyrsha thought, if I were a magic user, I'd turn this parchment into cloth. I'm afraid to bend this. She looked down the river. Near the horizon, Kyrsha thought she saw the castle. I hope so. I don't want this trip to take too much extra time. She looked down at the parchment, at the map. The parchment no longer looked stiff. She felt it. It felt like sheepskin. She was shocked. She said, Kyltie, you can read minds. You made the boat. Kyltie sadly shook her head. No, I've tried, but either I don't have the magic or I don't have the urgent desire. I definitely don't know any spells. I barely went to school before I was with you and Kyrian. You haven't taught me your spells yet. Kyrsha sat and thought. Sometimes things seemed to be right there when she needed them. And many times afterwards she remembered that she had just wished for what she had received. Mr. Volkov delivered the bread and asked the price of the lace and the linen. Kyrian thought quickly and somewhat frantically. How much would she ask for that? Yes. That piece is twice as big as normal, so it is 25 maces. And the bread? 2 maces. If you promise to get more bread sooner than 2 weeks, said Mr. Volkov. Kyrian laughed. I promise. He handed Mr. Volkov the money. Mr. Volkov left again. After Kyrian set up shop, he hung the wooden signs. One had the name they went by, and the other told what type of shop. It did not take Kyrian long to set up shop, since He had everything that he needed. He had tools, work tables, and moles. Now all he needed was a workhorse and a decent-sized wagon. Kyrsha left to see about procuring a horse and wagon. Right as Kyrsha stepped out, a group of ladies met him. "Mr. Klinhauser, Mr. Volkov told us that your wife has some lace for sale," stated Miss Brooklyn. "Can we speak with her?" "Kyrsha was up all night and hasn't gotten out of bed as of yet," stated Kyrsha. "But I'd be happy to show you the items." "Okay," replied Miss Brooklyn. The group of 5 ladies entered the shop. Kyrsha promptly went upstairs and retrieved Kyrsha's wooden box. He showed the ladies the new pieces. The ladies started their chatter about where they thought the lace would look the best in each one's home. Kyrsha waited patiently. The ladies went through the box of embroidered linens and laces. The ladies oohed and awed over the beautiful, delicate work. They also discussed how Kyrsha was too shy and too modest. Then abruptly, Miss Rubens asked, "Is Kyrsha under the weather?" Kyrsha jerked out of his thoughts. "What?" "You know, is she pregnant?" pressed Mrs. Rubens. "No, Kyrsha isn't pregnant," replied Kyrsha. "What a shame," stated Mrs. Brooklyn. "Well, don't give up, young man. Such a sweet thing can't stay barren forever." "We haven't tried to get her pregnant," replied Kyrsha instantaneously in Kyrsha's defense. He didn't stop to think. "What?" exclaimed Mrs. Brooklyn. "Why?" asked the other 4 ladies in unison. Kyrsha realized his mistake. "Kyrsha doesn't want children," replied Kyrsha, thinking frantically. She has Kyltie to take care of." The women aspirated. "The poor child," declared Miss Rubens. She pointed a finger at Kyrsha. "This is your fault, young man. You should have left Kyltie with her mother. Now you're depriving 2 women of their womanhood, of their motherhood." "Yes, poor Kyrsha," reflected Mrs. Brooklyn. "She probably feels unworthy to have your child, since you have asked her to raise your child, but you do not ask her to give you one. Then you are telling her that her children aren't good enough for you." "For shame," agreed Miss Leicester. "And such an older child," remarked Mrs. Dontower. "That must be really overwhelming for young Kyrsha." "And Kyltie," exclaimed Miss Simpson. "That child finds more trouble than any child I've ever seen." "That's because she doesn't have a mother who is old enough to care for her," stated Mrs. Brooklyn. She looked at Kyrsha. Kyrsha was frustrated. Kyltie wasn't his daughter, and Kyrsha wasn't his wife, but he couldn't tell these ladies that. Kyrsha asked, "Did you wish to purchase any of Kyrsha's pieces?" "We will be happy to purchase some pieces from Kyrsha," stated Miss Brooklyn. "But we will not purchase them from you," added Mrs. Rubens. The ladies turned, threw their heads up, and marched out the door. Kyrsha let out a heavy sigh. "What was I doing?" he asked himself. He looked around his shop. Everything seemed in order. Kyrsha picked up Kyrsha's box and headed upstairs. Near evening, when the lights started to fade, Kyrsha and Kyltie came to the castle. The river flowed underneath. The boat was up against an iron gate. "There should be a way to open the gate," Kyrsha said more to herself. "Then open it," replied Kyltie. "I will as soon as I figure out how," stated Kyrsha. "Though the chain wheel used to pull the gate up is most likely inside, not outside." "Then use your magic," Kyltie said simply. "I told you, I do not know magic," stated Kyrsha, irritated. "Okay, then, what happened to the map?" Kyltie challenged. Kyrsha looked down at the sheepskin map. "How should I know?" Kyrsha retorted. "You painted it." Would you stop pretending? Asked Kyltie, exasperated. And just imagine this gate raising up out of the water. I can imagine that, admitted Kyrsha. I can imagine it raising up enough for us to go under. And then, when we're halfway under, the old chain breaks, the gate falls, and the gate shatters our boat. Our things float away, and we're on different sides of the now broken gate. No! Don't imagine it that way, protested Kyltie, suddenly scared. You'll make it happen that way. Kyrsha paused. She saw an iron door a few steps away. Look, a door. Maybe it's unlocked. Of course it will be unlocked, stated Kyltie. You unlocked it. Kyrsha clenched her jaw. Kyltie, that is quite enough. I will show you that the door is locked. Kyrsha maneuvered the boat closer to the shore. She got out and gave the paddle to Kyltie. Kyrsha walked to the door and pulled on it. The door was locked. Kyrsha pulled and pushed on the door. It rattled, but it did not budge. See, Kyltie, it is locked. Then she kicked the door and said, Stupid door, why do you have to be locked? Kyrsha heard a click. She grabbed the door and yanked. The door easily opened. Kyrsha fell back, her jaw open. Wow, Kyltie, how did you do that? Kyltie mumbled. I didn't. You did. Kyrsha went in and pulled the door to. She easily found the chain wheel. She had a much harder time raising the gate, but she managed. The little wooden boat floated under the gate. Kyrsha let the gate down and got back into the boat. They were losing light quickly, so Kyrsha would pull the boat ashore soon. But she wanted to be farther inside first. What are we doing here? Asked Kyltie. Well, this river flows beside North Point Villa, so we will take the river home, replied Kyrsha. But here we will have some shelter for the night. Kyltie believed Kyrsha's answer. They were floating past a courtyard. Then the river split. Kyrsha felt the main vein of the river would lead out, so she took the lesser vein to the left. They floated beside a stone dock. There were stairs from the dock up into the castle. Kyrsha tied the little boat to a stone post. She helped Kyltie out and then got out their bag of things. She didn't bother trying to get the little cart out. Kyrsha headed up the narrow staircase and into the castle. After going through some small passageways, past several small rooms containing fishnets and harpoons, or shields and swords, or oars and sails, Kyrsha and Kyltie came to a large vestibule. Kyrsha held up her lantern. She saw a picture in the stone floor that displayed the heraldry of the people that had lived there. One symbol was three triangles, one triangle at each of the 3 points of another larger triangle. Another symbol was KY with a circle around it. Kyrsha shrugged. She didn't know much about heraldry, but the few things she knew weren't about such symbols. Come, Kyltie, said Kyrsha. Let's see if we can find a bed. Kyrsha headed up the large staircase that curved down into the vestibule. Kyltie followed. After Kyrsha took care of Kyltie, and after Kyltie was asleep, Kyrsha set to her task of exploring the castle. It occurred to Kyrsha that the main part of the castle was quite some distance above the river. So after she searched a few rooms, she looked for a way down into the cellar. She thought the space between the river and the castle to be too much space not to have a purpose. Kyrsha found an entrance to the cellar through a hidden door in the back of a fireplace. In the morning, Kyrian expected Kyrsha to return, but soon a few of the male villagers ordered work, so Kyrian busied himself with the orders and forgot the time. Kyrian did remember to purchase a horse and wagon. When Kyltie awoke, Kyrsha was sound asleep. Kyltie found some food, changed her own bandage, and started going through her lessons. Kyrsha awoke around mid-morning. She wanted to explore some more, but she didn't want Kyltie questioning her. Kyltie Kyrsha didn't say anything. She just got out her embroidery and started working. Kyltie really didn't think about the time or that they should be heading back to the village, so staying another day in the castle didn't seem too strange to her. After lunch, Kyltie asked to explore. Kyrsha, of course, tested Kyltie on her lessons first. Kyrsha was glad Kyltie wanted to explore because children could find things that adults couldn't, but Kyrsha didn't tell Kyltie this. At mid-afternoon, Mr. Parsons came by the shop. "Kyrsha, I wish to speak with you." "Of course, just a minute," replied Kyrsha. He finished putting his tools away. "What is it?" "Actually, I wish to speak to you and Kyrsha," stated Mr. Parsons, "but I'll start with you. There is a rumor going around the village that I'm here to check the validity of that rumor. The rumor says that you and Kyrsha are not... How can I say this? The rumor says that you and Kyrsha are not having sex. You're not having sex with your wife. Kyrsha, that is totally unnatural for a married couple, especially a couple so young. As I understand it, you aren't having sex with her because you don't wish to have children. Kyrsha, that is just not your decision. You need to allow the awesome in your life and in your marriage. If he wishes to give you a child, then you should not try to prevent him." That did it. Kyrsha could not stand this line any longer. He said with a raised voice, "I cannot have sex with Kyrsha because Kyrsha is not really my wife. We just told the village that." Kyrsha sighed. His mind raced. He thought, now what? He will want a reason. He said, "Look, Kyrsha was beat as a child. When her parents died, it was not safe for her or Kyltie to stay in West Point Villa any longer. So I brought Kyrsha and her sister Kyltie here. We told the lie because the truth is too painful for Kyrsha to bear." Mr. Parsons looked Kyrsha over. Finally, he asked, "Have you ever thought about marrying Kyrsha?" "I've asked her a few times, but she is too scared," replied Kyrsha. "She shakes with fear if I ask to hold her hand." "I see," said Mr. Parsons, rubbing his chin. "Well, it seems that we have misjudged you. No wonder Kyrsha is so introverted. Can I speak to her?" "No," replied Kyrsha immediately. "This is not to be discussed with her." "You are quite protective of her," stated Mr. Parsons. "Well, I guess I'll go deflate those rumors." Mr. Parsons left. Kyrsha said to himself, "Kyrsha, where are you? You should be home today. It shouldn't take you a whole day longer than it took me to return. Unless you went all the way back to the ocean and not straight here. I'll assume that's the case for now, especially since the bridge is near the ocean." After Kyltie went to bed, Kyrsha explored some more. Kyltie had found much besides the treasure room. They put some treasure in their bag. Kyrsha didn't want to take too much back. That would be suspicious. Kyrsha found a book on heraldry, so she drew the picture on the floor on a piece of parchment. She also found some other books. Some of them were magic books, but she didn't know since the language was different. Kyrsha hid the books in their bag and then went off again. Drawing the picture of the floor reminded her of the map room. The stones were under the castles. Kyrsha tried going down every way possible until she resorted to tapping the walls in the hallways. At last, she found a secret passage near the center of the castle. Upon entering, she could go up a winding staircase to the left or down a winding staircase to the right. Kyrsha went down the stairs until finally she came out. It seemed she was outside, but she thought that was impossible. The whole of the castle was above her. She looked out across the vast chamber and saw headstones. She looked up and saw the moon and the stars. The spiral staircase looked like a lone tower in the middle of the graveyard. Kyrsha's heart beat hard in her chest. She was excited about her find, but she was nervous all the same. She carefully made her way across the graveyard without losing sight of the tower. All the headstones had names she had never heard, and some had a different language, like the books she found. After some time, she came to a lone carved wooden staff. She wondered if the staff represented a headstone. Yet, at the same time, she felt drawn to the thick staff. As she placed her hand around the staff, it shrunk in height and width. Kyrsha pulled her hand back and stepped away. She watched the staff reform itself back to its original form. She reached out again. She said in a harsh whisper, "Oh, Awesome, I do not wish to disturb someone's grave, but I feel I need this staff. I feel like it is a part of me." She clasped the staff in her hand. It shrank until her fingers met the base of her palm. She easily slid it out of the ground. She brought it closer to her face to examine it. As she brought it closer, the domed top split open and slid down the staff to reveal a hollow opening. Kyrsha clasped both hands around the staff. "Why do I need this? What do I need this for? What goes in this staff?" The staff shrank even more. Kyrsha turned her hand so that the staff lay on her palm. It was the length of a needle now, though it was still much thicker than a needle. The dome had closed, and an eye appeared. It looked like a hand-carved wooden needle. Kyrsha closed her hand around the staff and held it close to her chest. She looked around to make sure the staircase was still there. And even though she felt like she needed the staff, she felt extremely nervous about taking it. She turned and quickly headed for the staircase. When she got back to the passage entrance, she stopped. She looked up the other staircase. Her heart was still beating hard in her chest, and her breathing was harsh. She opened her hand and looked at the staff. She closed her hand again and headed up the staircase. She climbed and climbed until she felt she could climb no more. She came out into the top of a tower. The stairs she climbed descended into the floor. Kyrsha carefully closed the heavy stone door. Stone pillars at 4 places, evenly spaced around the tower, supported its roof. The walls were only halfway up. Kyrsha felt the warm breeze, and she felt a warmth in her hand. The staff again grew in size. Somehow, Kyrsha knew what she was supposed to do. She put the staff in a hole in the floor and turned it a quarter turn. Past the hole, a stone moved back and a pedestal rose from the floor. On the pedestal were a small pillow and a purple orb. Kyrsha just stared. Within her, she knew it was an orb key, but had never guessed it would look so beautiful. The purple color was the most pleasing color to her eyes. Its warm light washed over her and made her feel at peace. A voice came from the stone and startled Kyrsha. She backed up and sank to the floor. She stood in a squat. "Kyrsha, dear, please answer me. This is your mother." "My mother is dead," Kyrsha replied. Her mouth felt dry, and her fear caused her to shake. "Take the stone, dear. It is yours. I am your mother, and I am not dead. At least, I'm not dead yet. I'm in the altararium. If you take the stone, we can talk until you come here." I'm not going there." "Do you have to?" "I don't have to do anything." "Dear, please listen." "No. If you're my mother, then tell me why you abandoned me." "Kyrsha, I had no choice." "You lie! There are always choices." "Yes, there are. But I chose to do what my people needed me to do." "Your people? Your people needed you to abandon your daughter? Abandon her to a horrible life? Silence. Another voice came through the orb. Kyrsha, we are very sorry about that. We did not know it would turn out that way. It's not all our fault, though. If you did not openly show your magic so much, the dissenters wouldn't know who you were. So my getting beaten was my fault. Kyrsha, that isn't exactly what I meant. Then what did you mean? And who are you? My father? Yes, dear, I am your father. Why was I left? Why couldn't you bring me to wherever you are? The situation is complicated. It has been complicated for a long time. Long ago, our ancestors wanted to protect our people from the dissenters, so they created the Ultrarium. Our ancestors created the Ultrarium to protect us. Only, we cannot leave. We cannot ever leave, unless a set of siblings meets some conditions. And one condition was abandon me here? Kyrsha asked harshly. I'm afraid so, replied Auric. Kyrsha, I cannot tell you everything now. I need to find your mother and make sure she is okay. I thought she was there with you, stated Kyrsha. She is in the ultra whatever with you. Ultrarium. She is. But this is like a huge city. Kyrsha, if you cannot find the strength to restore the Ultrarium to the mortal realm, then you must leave behind 3 children, 3 siblings. You should have given Kyrian a child already. 7 years needs to separate your children. Whoa, wait a minute. I'm not having any children. I don't want Kyrian to torture me like my dad did to my mom. Kyrian won't torture you. In fact, you will have him in the palm of your hand, just like I'm in your mother's. I take care of your mother, if I can, if she lets me. I most certainly do not torture her. Kyrian loves you, dear. Let him take care of you. I need to go, but if you take the orb, we can talk later. Tell no one of the orb. Hide it in your staff. Hang it around your neck and keep it with you at all times until you come here. Bye. I love you. The voice was gone. Kyrsha cried. She sank down to the floor. She didn't know what to think of the voices. She didn't know if she believed them or even if she wanted to. After some time, she felt anger rise within her, and she knew that she didn't want to hear the voices again. She jumped up, yanked up the staff, and swung at the stone. The stone hit the wall and bounced back towards her. It stopped before her and spun at her feet. The purple light washed over her, and she instantly felt calmer. She turned the staff down and touched the stone to stop its spinning. To her surprise, the staff opened, and the stone disappeared into the hollow opening. She turned the staff right side up again, and it shrank again. Kyrsha held it in her palm and stared at it for a few minutes. Then she searched her apron and pulled out some purple thread. She strung the needle on it with 2 threads. She would put it around her neck and tuck it under her dress. As soon as she tucked the needle away, Kyrsha felt at peace. She pulled the door and descended the stairs. She found Kyltie fast asleep. Kyrsha thought she'd be asleep herself in no time, but she tossed and turned until a few hours before dawn. Dear, are you okay? Asked Auric as he walked up quietly behind his wife. We should have never left our children, she quietly replied as she glanced back at her husband. I never wanted Kyrsha abused, or any of them. They all faced abuse. Poor Kyltie. Her adopting parents treated her like a dirty rag. Her adopting parents didn't feed her properly or clothe her properly. I know, dear. I know, said Auric solemnly. He turned his wife towards himself and hugged her. I never imagined it would be like that. My adopting parents treated me well. They were protective. They encouraged me. Kyrian's adopted parents never encouraged him. I know, dear, put in Arusha, My adopting parents were exceptional, but we could have stayed. We could have taken care of our children. And who would have led our people when our mother died? As it was, we barely made it here alive. The dissenters knew us by then. And now they know Kyrsha. Kyrsha is, dear, it is done. We cannot undo it, stated Arik firmly. We did it with the knowledge we had at the time. Orisha looked up into her husband's eyes. I miss my children. I want to see them, but I feel like when they are in reach, I will die. Arik sighed deeply. He knew that his wife truly felt that way, and he knew why. When they finally made it to the ultrarium, their mother died 2 days later. Come, let us rest. It is late. Did Kyrsha take her orb? Orisha asked anxiously. I don't know. I told her to take it, but I left her to find you. Arik, she needed to take her orb. And you needed me with you, replied Arik simply. My talking to her was not helping her. We shouldn't have tried to talk to her so soon. She would have taken her stone, her orb, if we had left her alone. Now there is nothing we can do. The orb will draw her back to it. It is hers. I saw that clearly. Unlike us, we had to make our orbs. We could not take the orb keys, although we were the siblings, because we just didn't have the power. Orisha smiled a soft smile. She knew Arik was right. The orb would draw Kyrsha to it, as it had already done, and Kyrsha had the power already to carry her orb, while Kyrsha and Kyltie did not. Yet their orbs were still far away, and they still had time to gain power and knowledge before they came in contact with their orbs. She just had to hope that Kyrsha would try to restore the ultrarium with Kyrsha and Kyltie. Arik and Orisha walked off towards their home, hand in hand. They had been in the streets of the ultrarium, and many of their people had stopped and watched, though they did not get to glance in the orbs to see what happened. The people knew their hope lay in the siblings, and from the talk going around, they knew that hope was wavering on a fine thread. They had heard of the abuse of the siblings had suffered. They knew Kyrsha had not yet become pregnant with the first child, and the possibility of her leaving a set of siblings was unlikely. As the king and queen walked away, many glanced down to their own children. They were glad their children were with them, but they were sad for the king, the queen, and the siblings. Okay, writers, that is the end of chapter 8. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. The past couple of Tuesdays, we have talked about emotions, and surely Kyrsha had a lot of emotions, which I didn't describe thoroughly. How would you feel if you were Kyrsha? Would you feel lost and confused? Would you feel abandoned? Would you feel anger and hate? What would you feel, and how would you describe those feelings inside you? Would some of your writing exercises that we've done together clearly express Kyrsha's emotions? So far, I have described Kyrsha more in unbelief or denial. So she hasn't processed all of her current emotions, and we will get to see her as she goes along through the story. What about Kyrsha? How do you think he felt when he spilled the beans? Just before he was so frustrated and a bit angry, but then a bit panicked because the truth came out. And Kyrsha isn't there so they can collaborate on their new story. What about Kyltie? She is quite desperate to get Kyrsha to acknowledge her magic. Young children notice things, and they're open to things adults aren't, like the existence of magic. Yet Kyltie still doesn't know enough, so some things scare her, like Kyrsha imagining the gate dropping down on their boat and splitting it in half. I imagine that was quite scary for her. Who knows, maybe in another edit run I can put in more emotions, like we discussed on the past 2 Tuesdays. I'll have to think about it, though, because while your story needs emotions, you still don't want to bog it down with too many details. You want to keep the story moving. Leave a comment below on if your writings so far with me would help you describe Kyrsha's and Kyrion's or Kyltie's emotions. Or leave a comment about the 3 different perspectives that I have going on with the 3 different ages of 9, 16, and 23. I look forward to reading your chapter 8 in our chapter exchange. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell so we can continue to write together. If you're exchanging chapters with me, send the PDF or Word document copy to WritewithMykela@gmail.com. Also, if you want to read some of my character bios for my Mykela series, you can visit my website at www.bymykela.com. The website doesn't have all of my characters yet, but I have most of the character bios for Mykela 1, White Witch Pending. Those bios are up on the website. By is spelled B-Y, and Mykela is spelled M-Y-K-E-L-A. So www.bymykela.com. Join me Tuesday for a writing assignment to help us improve our writing, and join me Friday for Chapter 9, Marriage. I hope to see you both days. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate your participation. If you know someone who would like this video, then please share it with them. This is Mykela with Write with Mykela. Bye for now.